Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live edition here on my channel. I want to apologize for a delay today. We've had technical difficulties with the sound. It's never easy to do live presentations. I want to start by acknowledging a person that I really admire here on YouTube and for inviting me recently to his channel, and we did an interview together. His name is Cesar Cordova. And I want to thank him for having me his channel. We did a video about Caravaggio, which this is sort of the follow-up version of that video. He has an amazing following on here on YouTube. And I've had a lot of his subscribers coming by the channel and thanking me for the content that we're sharing here on the channel, and also asking a lot of interesting questions. So I'm doing this live in part because I wanted to do a collaboration about Caravaggio. Cesar is a wonderful painter, and he's been doing research on Caravaggio for many years. And he recently shared some amazing insights and also some research that he has gathered. So I want to acknowledge all his help and his great friendship. I really appreciate what he's been doing in his channel. If you haven't checked out his channel, make sure to find in the description below his channel so you could check out this series of videos. He did, I believe it's 4 or 5 videos where we talk about Caravaggio and Rembrandt and other techniques that I've been discussing here on the channel, and also common interests that we have. So, and we share. So that's a really wonderful thing about YouTube that I've discovered. That, you know, just being able to get together with other painters, other artists, and share the knowledge. So, and we're both committed to referencing materials and doing, you know, extensive research. So I want to acknowledge his wonderful help. So yeah, so today I want to explore a little bit of Caravaggio's techniques. We're going to be sharing some videos of some reconstructions of the grounds. I have some images of some of my recent trips to Italy that I was able to gather, some exhibitions that I checked out of Caravaggio's paintings in Naples back in 2019. And just there's a wealth of information that I've gathered over the years. It's certainly a lot of information that I don't dare share all of it in one video. It'd just be too long. So we're just going to do a series of videos on Caravaggio's techniques. So today, I just want to focus on Caravaggio's grounds. This is an issue that I've been covering for the last months. And we've talked about Spanish painters that were influenced by Caravaggio, such as Murillo. We've talked about Velázquez, Suburan, Rivera. And today I want to talk about some of the materials and techniques that Caravaggio would have been using. There is a big, or I guess a growing consensus that Caravaggio used a very dark ground with a grisaille. There's a lot of videos here on YouTube that describe that process. And indeed, he uses that process, but that's not the only process that he uses to create his paintings. As my research has revealed, there's an evolution as well, which is to be expected. A lot of artists such as Velázquez and Rubens and a lot of great painters go through an evolutionary stage where they're trying out new things. And this is the same with Caravaggio. So I want to share with you guys an interview that I did, just an excerpt of the interview that we did with Cesar Cordova, where we're talking a little bit about his use of an underpaint or a dead color stage. And let's just take a look at that video now. So recently, and this is just to recap, Cesar and I talked about the idea of an underpaint or a dead color, and this dead color being used in the preliminary stages. And we talk about how Caravaggio might have been using vellaturas or scumbles to create some of these beautiful complex flesh tones. That's something that a lot of artists are aware of. And if you're not aware of it, well, check out this great interview. We sort of examine a few paintings, and we talk about using this amazing website that you could find in the description below. It's called Alta Definizione, which Cesar was so gracious to shared with me, and I was able to go in and take a look at some of these very high detailed images of Caravaggio. This is such an amazing tool for artists that are wanting to just get a closer look. For a lot of us, it's very difficult to take a look at these paintings. Even when you're at the museum, you can't get very close with them. So, because of restrictions. So with this technology now, you could see the very minute details, the laying of the paint, how the paint is applied. So in this interview that he shared in his channel, we talk about this techniques and how he's using an underpaint or dead color, similar to what I've done with other artists such as Vermeer. And this is important because this sort of has a relationship to Verdascio painting of the early Renaissance, and later on there's an evolution to grisaille painting. And Caravaggio does grisaille painting, which is black and white, but it's not just, he doesn't just do grisaille. There's a gamma of dead color layers that range perhaps from a grisaille to a sort of a greenish tint. And you see that in other artists as well that are working on a tenebrae style. So it's not necessarily always a grisaille that they're doing. So I want to share some images with you guys. Let's see. So I think, well, the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to share a video of the preparation of a ground. So Caravaggio was using a brown ground. Cesar shared with me, and by the way, if any of you that are joining, and thank you for coming by, have any questions, you could at some point during the live presentation ask questions. I know a lot of you that speak Spanish, and para muchos de ustedes que hablan español, si quieren hacer preguntas en español, lo pueden hacer y se las puedo contestar y traducirlas al inglés para mi audiencia anglosajona. Así que esto, yeah, so I'm just going back and forth because I do have a lot of audience here that speaks Spanish, so that's how we're going to work the multi-language situation. So you could ask the questions in Spanish and I could answer the questions in English and then translate them, or answer them in Spanish and translate them in English. That'll work. So yeah, so in terms of the ground, I've created a chart here that I want to share with you guys with the grounds, just a diversity of ground colors. These are reconstructions. These are gray grounds, as you can see here in this area. There's a gray ground and also cream color grounds. There's orange grounds, chocolate grounds right here, and then the more traditional reddish grounds. So these are, I just took the National Gallery Technical Bulletin. They have 3 images or 3 paintings that they've studied, and I've shared that link in the description below for the National Gallery. They published this article years ago, and they did a survey of 3 paintings, and in the 3 paintings, there's 3 different grounds. So that in itself shows you that Caravaggio was not just using one technique throughout his life. I mean, he's using a very dark ground towards the end of his life. He's using a more orange colored ground, such as the ground that we prepared last time, and I have it right here. This is more of the orange color ground that I've shared last time. So these grounds have a significant impact on the way that you apply paint. And the formula of these grounds is really important as well. You could get the ground too oily if you don't put chalk or enough chalk. So what is the right proportion? Well, that is open to experimentation. And I want to share with everyone, recently we've decided to do a panel and painting support, canvas support preparation class or workshop that is coming up. I'm going to be sharing that information at the end of the live presentation. And in this workshop, we're going to study the proportions of these materials. It's important to get these proportions just right because the ground could get too oily, not hold enough paint, It could peel off. I mean, it could be a real mess. So just finding out the materials in these scientific studies is not enough. It's important to experiment and to have a sound procedure on how to prepare these materials. So, and that's what I've been doing. I take this scientific information and I start reconstructing by using exactly the same materials, usually earth pigments, linseed oil or walnut oil. In this case, mostly linseed oil since it's stronger and more flexible. They find mostly linseed oil in Caravaggio's grounds, but in the upper layers, they find walnut oil. The use of calcium carbonate is really important. And recently, with this PDF that Cesar shared, I was able to reconstruct a ground, this image right here, this ground, which is umber and lead white ground. It's a double brown ground, which is documented by a PDF that he shared with me. And I will be sharing that description as well. I will be sharing that link in the description below. So let's just take a look at this video that I put together with you guys. Or let's take a look at the image. Yes. So this is an image from a double brown ground. This is the first layer has calcium carbonate and a brown pigment, earth pigment, such as umber or even perhaps a brown ochre. This is telling because usually the brown pigments such as umber or raw umber, could be burnt umber or brown ochre, they have a content of manganese. And this is what they find in the first layer. And then there's a second layer that has lead white and umber. And that's essentially what they find. And what I did is I just reconstructed this ground and using the traditional, knife to apply just to see what kind of surface you get. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that video. So I started with one first layer, okay, let it dry thoroughly. And with the knife, I scraped this layer smooth, okay? This is umber and calcium carbonate, okay? This knife I recently had made, and it's just amazing. You could scrape this painting smooth. And then on the second layer, I added lead white. The stack process lead white makes this really beautiful paint with the umber. And I was applying it with the same knife. And it comes out very, very smooth. It's a very smooth priming. And with this knife, you could apply it, very smoothly, very evenly. This is the traditional method. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how do you get the canvas smooth? And this is essentially the way to do that. It comes out very smooth. It will eliminate the canvas weave. And then with a bristle brush, I'm going in one direction. This is just to smooth it out and make it more even, essentially. And then I'm going on the opposite direction. There's instructions on how to do this by Spanish manuscripts, and that's where I got, essentially the procedure to use both knife and brush. So this is just a typical way of preparing a surface from the 17th century. And I've had a lot of you ask me, well, a double ground, I think I had a subscriber of mine tell me, well, why would the painter use a double ground? Isn't that just a monochromatic? If it's umber and white, isn't it just a monochromatic, underpainting like a grisaille right on top of that first initial layer? And unfortunately, that's a theory that a lot of you fall back on, but that's not the case. It's a homogeneous, thick layer that is very even. And it's, exists all over the painting surface. So essentially, that is, a ground, is part of the ground. So, and the lead white and umber is a mixture that is used by a lot of artists, Josepa de Rivera, Caravaggio, Murillo. So, and even Pacheco mentions the use of adding a little bit of lead white to give the priming, the paste a little bit of body. This makes it a lot smoother, it evens out, and it makes it less absorbent. So yeah, it's a really pretty standard procedure. So there's a lot of artists that did variations of this primings. Sometimes they would use raw sienna and red ochre. Sometimes there's yellow ochre and red ochre. There's just a whole array, as you saw in the chart that I shared with you guys. Actually, let's take a look at that chart. So I'm going to share with you some of the pigments here. So in this one, for example, this is one from the Supper at Emmaus. And this one has earth pigments. It has a little bit of lead white and calcite. Okay, that's a pretty standard, and you see that in a lot. Even Tiepolo, in the 18th century, he's using sort of an orange ground. In this one, there's red ochre. Okay, red ochre, calcite, and a little bit of lead white. This one has umber, black. This one they find in Salome, and I believe is the head of Salome, or it may be I'm not sure of the title, but so this is from the National Gallery Technical Bulletin, and this has black, umber, lead white, and a little bit of calcite. Okay, these have lead white. Okay, I believe it's vine black, a little bit of umber. This one has just umber. This is a double ground. This is the one that I just showed you. And then this one has lead white, black, and a little bit of calcite and a little bit of umber. So you see there the different variations. So just to try to put Caravaggio on in a box and say Caravaggio uses a chocolate ground all over throughout his whole life, it's just not really doing the research correctly. So it's important. This is something that I like to do here on my channel. I like to explore the evolution of artists and how they're using their materials. So that's an important aspect. So I want to take a look at some images now. Let's take a look at this painting of Cavalieri De Monte. And this is a painting at the Palazzo Pitti in Florence. I took this photo myself years ago, and this painting has a sort of a red ochreish ground. It's more of on the cooler red side. And let me just bring this back up. It's probably more similar to this ground here. Okay, and let's take a look at that a close up. Okay, and that's the next image. I believe we have the next image. Let's see. There it is. So there's portions of the ground that are being used in the face. There's also the use of impasto. He's dragging the brush in areas to create to achieve a turbid medium effect, which is something that we're going to see in a little bit in another analysis that I have prepared for you guys. You can see that this technique is very loose. He's sort of, it's very economical. He's just dragging the brush in areas. Some areas are painted very solidly. Some other areas are just left, where the ground is left exposed. So, and this sort of becomes his standard technique later on. In his early days, he's painting more opaquely, where he's covering the whole entire ground. And this is typical. I mean, you see this in Velázquez and Murillo in the early days. They're using a very polished technique. And as they get older, they loosen up the technique a little bit, and they become more economical. I have another image here, and it's this is the use of the ground. So this is a perfect example of the turbid medium effect. So if you take the lead white and you apply it thickly in areas, then you have impasto. But if you keep dragging that lead white and putting it, almost with no medium, or you could use medium or no medium, by just dragging it over the red ground, he's using that as sort of a halftone, and this has a beautiful effect. This red color is mixing with the white and creating an optical gray. And this is a standard technique that Caravaggio and a lot of painters from the 17th century used. They didn't paint everything opaquely, as a lot of us believe. They use the ground. It's a big part of their technique, and it's really a gorgeous effect. So let's just move on to the next image. So here we have a technique that is more typical of his slate style, where he's using the chocolate colored ground and dragging the lead white right over that brown ground. And I don't believe he's using a grisaille, or anything of similar to a grisaille in this painting. I think it's just mostly direct with color. And in his earlier period, he's using more of the grisaille technique. But by this time, he's sort of abandoned it. I mean, there in the ear, you could see that's just essentially the ground with perhaps some retouching. And this reminds me a lot of Rivera. Rivera was a painter that was influenced by Caravaggio. He was working in Naples, and precisely this exhibition I saw in Naples in 2019, where it had the paintings that Caravaggio does and executes while he was on the run in Naples. And by the time that he gets to Naples, he seems to be in a rush. I mean, of course, he's on the run. His paintings become a lot more looser. He's using cheaper materials, and the paintings are executed very rapidly. And you could see that an artist like Rivera would have used that technique. That's what he was seeing Caravaggio use. So he would have been influenced more from this style of Caravaggio than perhaps his earlier style. So let's move on to the next image. So here's another amazing passage from one of Caravaggio's paintings. And all these photos I took I believe the exhibition was Caravaggio in Naples. It was at the Capo de Monte Museum in 2019, and I just happened to be there, and I was able to take these amazing photos, close-ups, and there was no one around. Capo de Monte is not a museum that is well transited by travelers, so it's a real treat to go there. If you have not checked it out, make sure to visit this amazing museum in the city of Naples. So there you see how for the lights, he's using a lot of impasto. So it's a fully loaded brush, and he's dragging. I mean, and there's areas that are very opaque, and then in the halftones, in the turns, when he wants to turn a form, he sort of lets the brush stroke break, and that break really creates a beautiful contrast and a beautiful turning of the form. This is something that Rembrandt uses, later on in his life as well. It's a method that is employed by a lot of artists, not just Caravaggio or Rembrandt. A lot of artists. Titian is probably one of the main engineers of this style of using the broken brushstroke to turn form. And this is probably one of my most favorite techniques in painting. So it's almost like what I call in Spanish, un arrastrado drag. It's like a half drag. So it's something that you could do with a soft brush. If you're using bristle brushes, you could achieve this effect, but these very subtle dragging effects, you're able to achieve more successfully with a sable brush or a squirrel hair brush or even a polecat hair brush. So something that is, a brush that is soft. And there you can see where he leaves the ground exposed, and then he retouches with the dark, perhaps a glaze here and there as well. So these are painters that are using the whole gamut of effects. They're not just painting smoothly, although Caravaggio in some paintings does paint very smoothly as well. So let's just go ahead and move on to the next image. So another great detail here. This is a painting technique that is much more polished. He's painting much more opaquely, impastos in the lights, and some glazing in the darks right over the ground. So it's not just full, full light and then just ground. There's intervention there. I mean, he's going back into the darks and retouching the darks right over the ground with veil, with perhaps, very little white. That's something that's really interesting. When you look at the X-rays, you see very little use of white in the dark areas, and it makes sense. Today we use white everywhere, and a painter like Caravaggio would have been lightening the dark colors with perhaps a yellow ochre color, so or even a red ochre color. So there was no use of light colors like such as lead white in the dark masses. So really beautiful detail here of the impasto, and there's areas that are softened very beautifully. So that's something that I was discussing with Cesar. We were talking in the painting that I believe the painting is Judith and Holofernes, and the painting is painted very with a polished style, and it's very smooth. Every brushstroke is accounted for. He does retouch on top, but these paintings that I'm showing you are a lot looser. And here you can see that Caravaggio is sort of more, it's maturing in his style, and he's much more confident with his brushwork. He's able to achieve a lot more without, with the economy of means. Essentially, he's just, picking out the light areas and just leaving the dark ground to do, most of the work. So let's just move on. So another beautiful detail here, and here you can see that this is a very, very, very solidly painted head. He's applying there. I mean, when you look at this, it has the whole gamma. It has glazes, it has impastos, it has smooth painting, it has, opaque painting, transparent painting. So it's not just one. I wouldn't just say this is all painted opaquely and that's what it is and end of story. There's a lot of knowledge here. There's a whole gamma of knowledge and the whole plethora of painting techniques, and that's something that I keep going off about here in the channel, because these painters didn't just paint with one single method, such as academic painters from the 19th century, where they're just filling the canvas with just a very, very smooth, opaque layer, and that's it, and just letting it dry and maybe retouching it. This is an artist that knows the whole gamma of techniques, and that's something that I really admire about Caravaggio. He really understands the idea of saturation, light saturation, by painting the lights very, very opaquely and veiling the shadows. So when there were other followers of Caravaggio in this exhibition, and the sheer solidity of the light mass in his paintings versus his followers was uncanny to me. You could just see that he was just very, very aware of how that dark ground will darken your paintings if the lights are not painted very solid. And he does that. I mean, this is a painting that is very solidly painted. It's very opaque in the lights. So let's just move on to the next image. I believe those are the images that we have. So let's just go ahead, and I did an analysis here. Now, what we've done in Cesar's videos, we logged on to Alta Definizione, which is the website that you could find in the description below, and we did an analysis. And what I did is I pre-recorded some details from the Martyrdom of St. Matthew, which is the reconstruction of the ground that you saw. So the Martyrdom of St. Matthew has a double ground that is brown ochre, or some sort of umber color mixed with calcite, and then a second layer that has umber and lead white. Over this, Caravaggio applies 1 or 2 layers, perhaps 3 layers in some areas. There is pentimento in a lot of this painting, so I want to remind you about that. So what I want to do is I want to just show you some images, some close-up images that I pre-recorded. So let's just take a look at that video of the Martyrdom of St. Matthew. So this is Alta Definizione. You could get very, very, very close to these paintings, and analyze the way that they're painted, by just getting close. So the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to find the color of the ground, and I started just getting really, really close to the different areas. And you could usually find it in the borders in between the figures. This is an area where a lot of artists use the ground. So there's the brown ground, okay? And it's just sort of like a dark reddish color, sort of like a chocolate color. And this is something that is typical. I mean, when you're painting images on these dark grounds, you don't have to be so aware of the negative space. There's the dead color, okay, that we keep talking about. In this case, it's sort of like a grayish green color. Usually, my experiments with a lot of these painters is that they use some sort of ochre or sienna mixed with black, and perhaps even a red color, but very limited red color, because you want to keep the dead color, in a very sort of neutral, cool color. So the warm colors go on top. And there you can see the retouching, perhaps with the vermilion or the red ochre, lead white, and yellow ochre that goes on top of this greenish color or this green dead color. That's something that's very typical, and he just leaves it exposed in areas. So he does the modeling with this dead color, just like we've done in a lot of other videos, and then he'll retouch the areas of warmth with the bright colors such as the vermilion or red ochre. So another amazing use of paint is the turbid medium effect, which is essentially dragging that light white lead right over the dark ground. And you can see where he gets, by just thinning the paint with the brush, a very smooth brush, he gets this beautiful effect. And there he's doing it once again. If you take a light color such as lead white and you put it over a dark color very thinly, you get this sort of grayish optical gray. And I used the chemical analysis and the cross sections from this very area to sort of dissect a lot of the way that this painting would have been executed. You could see that by thinning, by painting areas thicker, Caravaggio's just accentuating the sense of light and getting this, really beautiful luminous effect over this dark ground. This is a amazing painting. I was able to see this painting in Rome, and although it's darkly lit, it's very hard, to get close to this painting. But with this technology, you're able to get, very close, and you're able to see exactly the whole plethora of effects that Caravaggio would have been using. It's not just painted smooth with, with blended passages. There's passages that are dragged. Some areas are painted smooth. There's, dark glazing. There's scumbling. Some colors are transparent. Some colors are opaque. So there's a whole gamma of effects here, and you can see how he sort of omits details as well. Some areas, you really can't see the detail inside the eyes. So he's willing to let areas go and fall into sort of a graphic shape to create that unity in his paintings. So that's, telling of his technique. And there you can see the underpainting as well, the dead color, and he's retouching on top with perhaps, glazes. Now, in some of the chemical analysis in the cross sections, they find layers of lead white right over the brown ground, and then they'll find a dark glaze, and then light again, and then dark again, which is really interesting. Cesar and I talked about that in one of his videos. They find that in some areas he's applying these translucent glazes right over the light, and that makes sense. He's probably glazing down the light so he could push the dark once again and then regain the light in sort of a form to achieve the turbid medium effect. This area that I'm showing you right here has 2 layers of lead white with a glaze in between and a glaze on top. So it's interesting to see that, because most likely he puts a final veil. It could be that he puts a final veil in a transition to a shadow or something like that. So it's very difficult to sort of narrow down and say Caravaggio painted this exact way. There's many techniques going on all at once, and there is just, it's very confusing. So it's my suggestions for a lot of you that are doing this type of analysis: take each part as an individual case study, and really analyze what's going on there. It's important to analyze if the paint was applied dry or if it was applied with with a medium applied to the surface, such as wet into wet medium. So that's probably my conclusion about a lot of Caravaggio's techniques. And in the future, I'm going to be doing a recreation by doing perhaps a painting recreation from this. I love this painting. I mean, look at this self-portrait, the way that he's applying the glazes, in some of the transition planes, and then in the lights, he's just dragging, he's just using full impasto. So a lot of information could be gathered from these websites that you could, log on and visit, and just spend hours. You could even do copies directly from this website that Cesar has been sharing with us. So I have some questions here. Let's see. I'm going to take a look at some of these questions. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone for coming by. I have a few questions here in Spanish, and I want to bienvenidos, darle gracias a todos que se unen del canal de César aquí. Muy agradecido por su apoyo y su visita. Y César, si me estás escuchando, creo que estás aquí. Muy agradecido por tu apoyo y tus investigaciones. Tus videos son magníficos y pues de verdad, de todo corazón, gracias. Tengo aquí una pregunta. I have a question here from Nicaragua Art. It says, maestro, ¿estas telas de lino eran mojadas o tenían una preparación previa a ser selladas con cola animal? So I'm being asked, are these linen fabrics, were they wet or wetted before they were prepared with rabbit skin glue? And the question, it's let's just give context to that question. So a lot of linen prior to the 19th century were not wet spun linen, meaning that there was not a commercial process where they would spin the linen with water. So they would deform the linen could deform. So if you take a linen that is not wet spun and you apply rabbit skin glue to this, the linen will deform. Okay, you will get the buckling and it will dry that way. Right today we have high quality linens that are wet spun, and this will not happen. Let me go back to Spanish. Muchas de estos linos que existían previo a siglo XIX y a métodos modernos de industrialización no eran preparados con agua, tejidos con agua. Eso es un método moderno. Entonces, si ustedes compran un pedazo de lino que no está preparado con agua, se va a deformar cuando aplican la cola. Es importante siempre lavar el lino y después estirarlo y después prepararlo con la cola animal. Okay? So we're going to, and there's different methods, and these methods are not easy. I've had a lot of my students be very frustrated there's linens that are prepared the old-fashioned way. And if you are not sure if your linen's wet spun, do not take the risk, because if you're preparing a very large canvas, you could quite literally, put rabbit skin glue and deform your linen and not have a way back. So it's important to, as a general rule, you could just stretch the canvas, give it, a couple layers of water, and just let it dry. And if it's deformed, then you stretch it again, and then you rabbit skin glue it. So la mejor manera es estirar el lino, ponerle unas cuantas capas de agua, ¿okay? Con la brocha, dejarlo que se seque. Si el lino está deformado, pues entonces hay que reestirarlo y volverlo a cubrir con la preparación de cola animal. En los tiempos de antes, esa preparación no existía y por ende los maestros lavaban la tela. Y Palomino tiene instrucciones para hacer eso. So, excellent question. And yes, I've experienced that myself. I bought some cheap linen years ago, and it was not wet spun, and I spent hours trying to correct already rabbit skin glued canvas. So you could really have a headache in your hands if you don't take this precaution. I have another question here. Jacobo dice aquí, hola Luis, ¿no te sucede que si el lino tiene arrugas, a pesar de aplicar la cola de coneja, quedan algo marcadas? La misma pregunta, más o menos. Sí, esto es bien importante intervenir el lino primero con algún tipo de agua para prepararlo para la aplicación de la cola, ¿ok? So, yeah, a lot of questions. We have an amazing crowd here from Latin America. That's wonderful. Thank you for coming by. By the way, a lot of the videos are translated in Spanish. If you go to the subtitles, you could essentially find the subtitles in Spanish. Muchos de los videos están en español con los subtítulos, así que asegúrense de, en unas cuantas horas, yo usualmente subo los subtítulos en español. Si no tienen, ¿verdad? La manera de entender los videos, pues entonces pueden bajar el subtítulo, ¿ok? I have another question here, and again, thank you for your amazing questions. This is great. Let's see. TT, I have a question. TT, thank you for coming by. Which medium would you suggest for multiple glazing, especially if you want them very translucent? So the glazing, so let's see. My glazing medium that I usually recommend, if you have access, in the case of Caravaggio, let's just talk about Caravaggio first. So for glazing, a painter like Caravaggio and a painter like Rivera or even Velázquez, they're using some sort of oil that has been prepared with heat, sunlight. It has been bodied somehow. So if you cook oil with heat and some sort of dryer, the oil gets thicker, and then you could thin this oil with some sort of solvent, such as spike oil of lavender or turpentine. I usually recommend spike oil of lavender because the turpentine could be toxic, especially if you're working indoors. If you're using sun thickened oil or sun wash thickened oil, this is an excellent medium for glazing. But a lot of us do not have the time to make these oils. I've recommended these oils in the channel for many videos, and a lot of us just do not have access. So another modern equivalent medium that is excellent is liquid. You could take liquid, mix it with a couple drops of regular oil, and be on your way glazing, and it will dry perfect. And then let that dry, and then layer on top. So yeah, so there's a lot of a lot of mediums that you could use, and there's a lot of commercial mediums that they're selling nowadays. But I like to keep it simple. Some artists use resins. They don't really find a lot of resins in painters such as Caravaggio or Velázquez, and their paintings have fared fairly well. Painters that have used a lot of resins during the 19th century, especially, their paintings are in horrible condition. So I like to stay away from the resins. I've had a lot of people tell me, well, they find resins and resins, are important. Well, if you want to use resins, that's fine. But the research points that resins become brittle and they crack a lot faster than a bodied oil. So that is my take on it. So now there's a small detail that I want to share, and unfortunately, I'm not going to get to it during this live presentation because Caravaggio is just too big. I've done a lot of research, and there's a lot of other details that I want to go into, such as engraving the drawing into the wet ground, which in the next video I'm going to cover. I'm going to be talking about the underdrawing in the next video. So I'm doing a whole series of videos about Caravaggio, and usually I do a recreation as well. So I like to take my time and talk about things that are very detailed, but there's also a detailed that has come up, and it's the use of emulsions by some of my other subscribers. They have mentioned the use of egg tempera mixed with oil. And Caravaggio does use this medium to retouch a lot of his paintings, and I'm going to be recreating that medium in the next videos. So that's going to be in the future. So again, this is a wonderful crowd. I want to thank everyone for joining. I've been traveling for the last couple of weeks. I think a lot of you saw the video about RH Paints. I want to thank Rolf from RH Paints, such an amazing person. We had an amazing visit in Albany, New York. That's a wonderful video. For a lot of you, I've had a lot of you asking me about lead white, how to make lead white. Listen, this is a great lead white that you could purchase ready-made. As a matter of fact, he has a walnut oil with glass lead white that is very similar to something that Caravaggio would have been using. It's decently priced. It's great quality. It's well made. So for a lot of you that are looking for for lead white, that's a great alternative. I myself usually use the historical lead white, but that's a much more expensive, much more involved, much more toxic process. So I've had a lot of you sort of write to me and tell me, Luis, I need lead white. Where could I find lead white? And I know a lot of you are having a hard time finding it. So that's a great source. So make sure to check out that video. And also, I also have an amazing workshop coming up about the whole technology of preparation of grounds. We're going to be learning how to prepare a oil ground with the formulas. I'm going to be sharing the whole process, the formulas with you guys, what types of oils I use, the drying time, that whole thing. And also I'm going to be sharing the preparation of panels, wooden supports, how to make the traditional gesso, how to scrape it, how to sharpen the knife, which is such a pain. Sharpening the knife to scrape a gesso panel is a science, So there's a lot of details that I cannot possibly share here on the live presentations. That's why I do a lot of my live online classes. I also have a summer workshop. Remember that most of these live presentations are meant to sort of spotlight the technique of a particular artist. And by no means do we learn how to paint here or any of that. It's mostly designed to talk about the mechanics of technique. For a lot of you that are looking for instruction and critique, my classes that are hosted on Atelier San Juan meet once a week. We have a small group that meets every Saturday. We develop different projects, and I do the critiques online. I'm getting ready to launch a promotion for my summer intensive program that will begin in June. This is a great opportunity for a lot of you to, get a nice chunk of classes. I believe that we have a very reasonable price. So check it out. I'll log on to ateliersanjuan.org and check out the listing of classes that we have available. So there's a lot of information, and a lot of you, please, I'm going to make a plea here for a lot of you. I get questions that have already been answered on a lot of my videos. So there's a whole library of videos, and sit back, enjoy all the videos about the different aspects of oil, how to prepare the oils, how to make the grounds, the different techniques of the different artists. So give yourself the time to check out the library. It's a very extensive library. I'm very proud of all the work that has been going on. And it's important for you to have context. Every single live that I do here is meant to give you context from something that I've covered or something that I will be covering. And if you just talk about mediums without the context of how these mediums are being employed, you're really at a loss, because those mediums have a purpose. So really important. And by the way, I want to thank everyone. We've reached 10,000 subscribers. I started with 13 subscribers on this channel 2 years ago, and a lot of you have stuck around, have supported the channel, have shared the channel on Instagram. By the way, if you have not logged on to my Instagram, check out my Instagram page, Luis Borrero Art. Also my Atelier San Juan Instagram page. A lot of you that speak Spanish, para muchos de ustedes que hablan español, me preguntan, ¿dónde puedo conseguir más de los videos en español? Atelier San Juan Facebook tiene una biblioteca de videos en español donde también pueden disfrutar allí. Así que, y si no le han dado like a la página, denle like y sigan la página. So a lot of information. There's videos in Facebook. There's videos here. I have my Udemy service with classes. So there's a lot of information for you guys to enjoy. Again, I want to thank everyone for supporting my channel. 10,000 of you have subscribed to my channel. I never thought we would even reach 100. These are very old-fashioned techniques, a lot of outdated information. So I thought, but there's a lot of interest, and a lot of artists are genuinely interested in their materials, and that's just a wonderful thing to see for me as an artist and as a creator here on YouTube, that a lot of you are paying attention to the content, that are enjoying the content, and that are supporting the channel. So again, I want to thank you for your wonderful support. I'm going to say goodbye for now. So until next time, where we will come back with more techniques about Caravaggio's process. Have a good one.